Okay, let's get into 3.1. Right, so we first dealt with highest common factors, then we dealt with the difference of two squares. For this one, we are dealing with a trinomial. Tri refers to three, so there's 1, 2, 3 terms here. But not only is there three terms, our three terms are descending powers of x. That means we have something that looks like this: ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, descending, that means going down. Descending powers of x, here's a square, then there's a x to the power of 1, and then there's what looks like no x at all. Okay, so it's x squared, x to the power of 1, no x. That's the trinomial that we are looking for. And when it falls into that form, then we can factorize it. So the way that we factorize our trinomial, we are going to make two sets of brackets. Okay, so let's make one set of bracket, two sets of brackets. And I think in our first video, we mentioned that we get two kinds of trinomials that we look at. We said we get a basic trinomial and an advanced trinomial. So the basic trinomial is when this a value over here is equal to 1. For example, the one that we have above here, we see that there's nothing in front of the x squared, meaning there's an invisible 1 there. Okay, so this is a basic trinomial, and once you have your basic trinomial, you can go make two sets of brackets as you have here, and then you can go put x and x into both of them. As soon as you can identify that this is a basic trinomial, meaning it forms into this ax squared plus bx plus c, where a is a 1, you can make two sets of brackets, x and x. That required zero thinking, or because you could identify this is a basic trinomial. An advanced trinomial is when this a value is equal to something other than 1, which we will get to. But for now, because it's a 1, you can make two sets of brackets, x and x. Now we need to decide two other things. One, we need to decide what values, what numbers will go here. And then lastly, we need to decide what signs will go in the middle. So how do we decide on the numbers? We're going to look at the constant, which is a minus 35 for us. And we're going to write down the factors of 35. So let's go with that, factors of 35. So 1 times 35 gives you 35. 2 can't go in there. 3 can't go in there. 4 can't go in there. 5 goes in there. 5 times 7. 6 can't go in there. So we have all of the factors. Okay. So we wrote down the factors of our constant. Next, we're going to look at these pairings. Okay, so when I say pairing, I mean we look at these two values together, and you look at these two values together. So I have these two pairings, and I'm going to just look at the first pairing. I'm going to look at the 1 and 35, and I'm going to see what happens when I add the values together, what happens when I subtract the values. So if I take 35 and I add, so both of them are positive, I add the 1, I end up with 36. Right? Or let's say I take the 35 and I subtract the 1. Let's make both of them negative. I end up with a negative 36. So that pairing 35 and 1, they could get me a positive or a negative 36. Okay, so now let's do the same, use the same pairing, and we're going to choose opposite signs. So I'm going to make it a 35, which is positive, and a negative 1. So we have different signs now. 35 minus 1 is 34. Right? And if I make the 35 a negative and the 1 a positive, I end up with negative 34. So this pairing, the 1 and 35, they could get me a positive or a negative 36, or a positive or a negative 34 when I added or subtracted them. Are any of those values, the 36 and the 34, are any of those values my middle term, my b value? So if I look here, my middle term, my b value is a plus 2. Okay, so the pairing that we use now, the 1 and 35, that couldn't get me a positive 2. So let's go look at our second pairing, this 5 and the 7. So we're going to do the same thing with the 5 and the 7. If I have the 5 and the 7 and both of them are positive, 5 plus 7, that's going to give me 12. What about if both of them are negative? Minus 5 minus 7, that will give me a minus 12. So that pairing can get me positive or negative 12. What if I have them with different signs? So if I have a 5 and a 7 and the 5 is maybe negative, the 7 is positive, that will give me a positive 2. Or let's change those signs up. Let's make the 5 positive and the 7 negative. that will give me a negative 2. So that pairing 5 and 7 can also get me a plus 2 or a minus 2. Okay, so that pairing gets me a 12 over 2, positive or negative. Let's go look back at our question. So our question has a positive 2. That tells me my 5, 7 pairing can get me my middle term with that combination over there. All right, so the rest of these, I'm just going to erase it because they're not useful for my answer. Okay, so what is going to go into my bracket? The 5 and the 7. Let's put those there. The 5 goes in there and the 7 goes in there. Why do the 5 and the 7 go in there? Because the 5 and the 7 is the pairing that can make my middle term. Lastly, we're going to decide our signs. In order for us to get our plus 2, in order for us to get our plus 2 over here, the 7 needed to be positive, the 5 needed to be negative. Right, so let's go back to the brackets. 7 needed to be positive, 5 needed to be negative, and that's our basic trinomial.